She came home from Africa in a medical evacuation, recovering from surgery that left her with a collapsed lung. And within months of that, she was back on a motorcycle, heading into the unknown again. Her name is Noraly Schoenmaker, and she runs one of the most quietly remarkable YouTube channels in the world. By the time you finish this video, you'll understand exactly why a Dutch geologist became an international phenomenon, and why the real story behind Itchy Boots is nothing like what most people assume. What most people watching Itchy Boots see is someone who looks like she was born on a motorcycle, effortless, prepared. Moving through jungle roads and mountain passes like the chaos is just part of the plan. That version of Noraly is real, but it wasn't always there. Before any of this, Noraly Schoenmaker was a professional geologist working for a Dutch maritime and dredging company called Van Oord. Her work took her across the world: the Bahamas, Brazil, Kuwait, Kazakhstan, Morocco, Indonesia, Australia. She was good at the job. She climbed from engineering geologist to project superintendent. For 5 years, she built a career in some of the most remote locations on Earth, studied sand, mapped seabeds, and went home to the Netherlands when the contract was done. She also owned a Ducati Monster 796 during her time in the Netherlands. A motorcycle sat in her life before the channel existed. Most people don't know that part. She wasn't discovering motorcycles for the first time in India. She was rediscovering something that had been dormant for years. Her academic background is equally unusual for someone who would go on to run a travel YouTube channel. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Biogeology and a Master of Science in System Earth Modeling, both from Utrecht University, graduating with honors. She even started doctoral research before pivoting to industry work. A significant intellectual background that would never be obvious from the warm, accessible personality on screen, but one that shaped how she observes the world around her. She speaks 5 languages: Dutch, English, German, Portuguese, and Spanish. Those aren't tourist phrases. They're conversational, functional, and they open doors in countries where an English-only traveler would be completely lost. The version of Noraly that exists on YouTube is the result of all of that accumulation: the science, the fieldwork, the languages, the years spent in remote places learning to handle isolation and logistics. None of it was wasted. Every field contract she ran was, in a way, preparation for something she didn't know was coming. And then, in 2018, something happened that changed all of it overnight. She found out her long-term partner had been having an affair. That's the real origin story of Itchy Boots. Not a spontaneous desire for adventure, not a lifelong dream of motorcycle travel. A relationship ended, and the life she had been building around that relationship, the house, the job, the future, collapsed at the same time. She was in her early 30s, she had a stable career, and suddenly, none of it felt like enough of a reason to stay. She quit her job at Van Oord in July 2018. She sold most of her belongings. She booked a one-way flight to India. The plan at that point was not to make a YouTube channel. The plan was to move, to get away from something. She arrived in India with no fixed destination and no timeline. She started backpacking. She was figuring it out as she went. Then she rented a motorcycle. In the Himalayan town of Manali, she got on a Royal Enfield Himalayan and spent 3 weeks riding through mountain terrain. She had ridden before, the Ducati back in the Netherlands, but this was different. This was thousands of kilometers of altitude and altitude sickness and broken roads and absolute unpredictability. And somewhere in those 3 weeks, the plan changed entirely. She bought a Royal Enfield Himalayan in Delhi. She named it Basanti, after a Bollywood character from the film Sholay. Then she started riding east. That first journey covered 36,000 kilometers across 25 countries in 8 months: Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, Iran, Central Asia, Russia, the Caucasus, and eventually back to the Netherlands. She documented all of it on a YouTube channel she called Itchy Boots, a nod to the traveler's restlessness, that permanent itch to keep moving. The channel was not built on a strategy. It was built on footage she was already capturing, shared with anyone who wanted to watch. And here's what the comments kept asking. And here's the answer they never got, until now. Most people assume Itchy Boots went viral. That one video blew up, the algorithm noticed, and the rest followed. That is not what happened. Noraly built her audience through consistency and volume. She uploaded constantly, daily episode-style vlogs from the road, short enough to watch on a lunch break, but long enough to feel like a real journey. The format was deliberate: simple camera work, genuine reactions, no manufactured drama. She didn't yell at the camera. She didn't use clickbait thumbnails of herself pointing at something off screen. She just showed what was happening. The channel grew slowly, then all at once. As she moved through countries that most Western travel creators had never filmed, Iran, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, she was showing her audience places they had only ever associated with news headlines. Iran, in particular, made an impression. Her coverage of the country contradicted virtually everything her American and European viewers had been told to expect. That gap between reality and assumption became a core part of what made Itchy Boots different. She structured her seasons deliberately. Each journey had a geographic focus and a beginning and end. Season 1 was the first India to Netherlands route. Later seasons covered South America, Iceland and Scandinavia, Southern Africa, and eventually West and Central Africa. Each motorcycle had a name. Basanti was the first. Dano, Ronin, Savannah, and Alaska followed. Alaska, a Honda CRF 300 Rally, would be the bike she was riding when everything went wrong in 2024. She built a business around the channel, not just a hobby. YouTube ad revenue funded the travel. She added merchandise, a membership program called the Itchy Boots Academy, and a brand ambassadorship with Revit, a Dutch motorcycle clothing company. None of it was accidental. She ran the operation herself. By the time she was deep into Africa, she had more than 2 million subscribers. The channel she had built to process a painful personal ending had become a full-time livelihood, watched in living rooms across every continent. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around her saw coming. In December 2023, Noraly was riding through Nigeria on her way to Abuja. On the Monia Isayan Road in Oyo State, she was stopped by police officers who openly demanded a bribe, on camera. She didn't cut the footage. She didn't downplay it in the edit. She published it. The video spread across Nigeria within days. The officers in question were identified, 2 special constables, and both were dismissed from the Nigerian police force following the public outcry. A single travel vlogger's camera, on a dirt road in Oyo State, accomplished something that years of reform advocacy had struggled to achieve. The footage ignited a national conversation about police corruption that stretched far beyond the motorcycle community. This is the part of Noraly's story that gets left out of almost every profile written about her. She is described as an adventure rider, a travel creator, a female trailblazer in a male-dominated space. All of that is accurate. What is less often noted is that her presence in places like Nigeria has had direct, documented consequences in the real world. She wasn't trying to be an activist. She was just filming what happened. But that choice, to keep the camera running, to not smooth over the uncomfortable moment, is what made the difference. She had made that same choice throughout her travels. In Iran, she filmed strangers inviting her for tea. In Kazakhstan, she documented the quiet strangeness of the steppe. In Cameroon, she pushed through jungle roads that turned to mud after rainfall and crashed multiple times before finding a place to sleep. None of it was sanitized. That approach is also what makes the Tanzania crash in 2024 so striking, because she filmed that too. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What she did instead is the part nobody talks about. Mudivon, it was a rut, an ordinary shallow rut in the road outside of Mbeya, Tanzania. She had ridden through the Congo, through deserts, through mountain passes that would end most riders on their best day. And then a rut, the kind of thing she had navigated hundreds of times, put her down hard. She knew immediately the collarbone was broken, possibly her foot as well. She couldn't lift the bike. She activated her Garmin InReach satellite beacon and sent a message to a contact asking for help. She lay by the road and waited for a vehicle to come. A truck eventually stopped. She got to a hospital in Tanzania where her collarbone fracture was confirmed. Then she made the decision to ship herself and her motorcycle, Alaska, home to the Netherlands for surgery. The surgery went badly. What had appeared to be a straightforward collarbone repair turned out to involve more bone fragments than the initial imaging showed. And somewhere in the procedure, not from the crash itself, but from the surgery, her lung was punctured. She spent additional time in hospital recovering from an injury caused by the treatment of her original injury. The entire process, from crash to recovery bed in the Netherlands, was documented. She filmed the hospital updates. She filmed herself processing the setback with the same measured calm she applies to navigating a flooded jungle track. She was not performing resilience for the camera. She was just being herself. Season 7 ended there, Africa unfinished. A continent she had been riding through for months, left half explored. She never talked about this publicly, until now. Wait, she did talk about it publicly. That is the point. That is what makes her different. She talked about all of it, in real time, with no narrative management and no spin. The camera was there for the crash, the hospital, the complications, the surgery results. Her audience watched a 2 million plus subscriber channel go dark and knew exactly why, in Noraly's own voice. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. She used the recovery to write Free Ride, Heartbreak, Courage, and the 20,000-mile motorcycle journey that changed my life. Was published in English on June 3, 2025, through Atria Books, an imprint of Simon & Schuster. It had previously been released in Dutch. The English edition covers the events of Season 1, the affair, the flight to India, the Royal Enfield, the first journey across Asia and home. It is not a recap of the vlogs. Reviewers who had watched every episode noted that the book contained experiences and inner life that the camera never showed. The cold, the hunger, the fear, and the specific kind of loneliness that builds on a long journey when the novelty has worn off. The book was priced at $29.95 thamps in hardcover. For context, a full season of someone else's life, the whole emotional architecture behind years of videos, for $30. Then she planned a US book tour for June 2025. Venues were booked, events were arranged. She canceled it. Writing from Yemen, actively on the road again, she announced that she would not be traveling to the United States because it didn't feel safe. She had a valid 10-year visa. But she had watched European travelers being detained and deported for social media content deemed contrary to US foreign policy under the current administration. A high-profile Dutch creator who had filmed herself navigating bribe-demanding police in Nigeria, someone whose channel documented the world as it actually exists, not as any government might prefer, was not willing to take that risk. The cancellation was covered internationally. Her American fans were disappointed. She was clear about why. That decision, made on a dirt road somewhere in the Middle East, communicated via social media to millions of followers, is a version of the same instinct that kept the camera running in Nigeria. She does not navigate around uncomfortable realities. She rides through them. Most people in her position would have stayed. Do you think she was right to go? She came back to the road faster than anyone expected. By late 2024, Noraly had fully recovered from the collarbone injury and the surgical complications. She announced Season 8, and instead of returning to a newer, more powerful machine, she went in the opposite direction. A Yamaha XT600Z Tenere, a bike that is nearly as old as she is. The model she chose was built 5 days before her own birthday. She had the bike prepared by a Tenere specialist in Germany. Engine upgrades, revised lighting, improved suspension, purpose-built luggage capacity. She stripped it of modern electronics and refitted it for the kind of travel she actually does. She named it, acquired a yellow Dutch license plate, and rode it to Istanbul to begin Season 8. The choice of bike was a statement. Simpler, more mechanical. The kind of machine a geologist who grew up riding through rough terrain would choose deliberately, not a machine designed to make the road easier. In 2026, Noraly Schoenmaker was named to Time magazine's Time 100 Creators list, described as one of the 100 most influential digital voices in the world. She has 3.3 million subscribers on YouTube. She has ridden more than 118,000 miles across 80 countries. She has a published book with a major imprint. She has been documented refusing bribes on camera in West Africa and refusing to enter a country whose visa policies she considered a threat to her safety. She is 38 years old. She calls the Netherlands home between seasons, but she is rarely there. A heartbreak that would have sent most people back to the beginning sent Noraly Schoenmaker around the world instead. That's the actual story, not the adventure, not the subscriber count. The fact that a woman in her early 30s, with a geology master's degree and a broken relationship, made a decision that most people would never even allow themselves to consider, and then built something permanent out of it. Season 8 is ongoing. The book is in print. The Time 100 recognition is recent. She is, by any honest measure, at the peak of what she built. Here's the question worth sitting with. If Noraly had stayed in that job, stayed in that relationship, played it safe, would she have been happier? Or is the discomfort that launched all of this exactly what she needed? Let me know what you think below.